We have been in the terrible fanfic era of comic books for several years now. I would say 40 to 50% of all comic books from Marvel and DC, the premier publishers in America, are just bad fanfic. And of that, I would say another half of that itself is just bad LGBTQ plus fanfic. And a lot of that is serving the X-Men titles at this moment. And I wanted to talk to my good friend Dok about that. How you doing, Dok?
I hate it here, but thank you for having me.
Well, I'm glad you could make it. Obviously, we got the big reveal that after years and years of not so subtle LGBTQ plus subtext, the powerful X-Men member Rachel Summers, the multiversal daughter of Cyclops and Jean Grey, has entered into an intimate romantic relationship with Marvel's current Captain Britain, Betsy Braddock, the hero formerly known as Psylocke. In the pages of Knights of X #4, this romantic pairing has been a long time coming, and fans of the character and series are truly delighted that these two complex queer women are finally being allowed to show their obvious love for each other on panel. Obviously, those are not my words. Those are the words of the shill comic book media. But we're getting a lot of this kind of stuff. First of all, what did you think about the big reveal that Psylocke, Betsy Braddock, and Rachel Summers are now lovers?
I think Tini Howard writing lesbian /fic is not surprising because that's all she writes. I mean, she writes D&D, she writes /fic. I know this article says that it was a long time coming. Yeah, just since Tini Howard took over. That's it. That's the long time they're talking about.
You mean they weren't teasing this thing for decades like they're kind of insinuating in the article?
No. The long time coming here is literally just since Tini Howard took over and decided no women are straight.
You could say this is a long time coming because really X-Men is just like the house of weird, bad LGBTQ fanfic these days. How the hell do we get here? I know a lot of people, it's going to come right into their minds, Brian Michael Bendis and Iceman. Some people might point to Minister Sinister and what Kieran Gillen has done with that character. Where did this start?
Well, there was always some LGBT subtext with Claremont, but he wasn't the fanfic writer. I think the fanfic era started, honestly, it was a little bit with Chuck Austen. Outside of his mainstream comic work, just literally wrote like /fic. Like he wrote weird gay, lesbian, and hetero, like porn comics on the side. So he brought a little bit of that, especially when he added that nurse to Havoc, Annie Kazakhstan, or whatever the hell her name was that we couldn't pronounce. She was obviously kind of like a /fic insert, kind of the Mary Sue type character that he added in there. But I'd say it really, really took off during the Kieran Gillen, the first time around, with him turning Sinister, essentially queering him up by completely changing the character. And then it kind of snowballed from there.
And it's only kind of getting worse and worse, and it doesn't feel like Marvel Comics can learn from many of their mistakes. Obviously the Iceman reveal is essentially reviled within comic books. Most Iceman fans absolutely hate what they did to the character, and we're years upon years after that, and they're just making it worse and doubling down on this terrible mistake. The only identity that Iceman has now is that he's the gay X-Men character. You only see him in the background. He kisses another male character, and then you never see him again. And if they're going to do these kind of stories, they need to do something that actually adds to the flavor of the character rather than just pigeonholing them down to being this weird one-note LGBTQ character. But that seems to be all that these writers today can actually do.
Well, see, it's a trap that they set for themselves, and I don't think they realize they've done it. They'll turn a previously straight character queer, I mean gay, lesbian, bisexual, whatever. But then the problem is they've now backed themselves into a corner where that character can no longer make mistakes, because if they make a mistake, it is now, well, that character now represents all of queer community. If that character makes a mistake, they'll get canceled by the people that they're trying to appease for making a gay character or a lesbian character or bisexual character.
I think it kind of goes deeper than that, Doc. I think you've got a point that they put themselves in a corner, which is never a good idea as a writer. But I think the big mistake is that they aren't courting superhero fans. So whenever that character shows up in a comic book, they think the reason the character sells is because it's now LGBTQ coming of age stories, and it ceases being a superhero comic and it just becomes that, like this weird slice of life thing, even if it's just a cameo in a comic book, and that's all that they are willing to use the character for. They're no longer allowed to be heroes because in the writer's mind, they're not really doing superhero comics anymore.
Well, yeah, you are correct. I mean, and I guess the thing I was getting to was once they put themselves in that corner, they realize, oh, fuck, I can't even use that character anymore because I can't make them make a mistake. I can't make them obviously into some perfect being. So fuck it. I just don't use them anymore. And then when I do use them, I only use them for the thing that they are now known for.
Yeah, it's strange. We're getting these really weird self-insert characters. It's not just an X-Men thing. This is kind of goes across the board for DC and Marvel, but I think X-Men are a really good examination of how this is working. The worst example is Steve Orlando's Somnus character that he introduced in that Pride anthology. Now he's one of the members of the Marauders, and the story behind this character is actually quite revolting. He put a character down and essentially seduced him for 1,000 years, and they just had sex for 1,000 years, and that's the character, the original character that Steve Orlando ended up putting into the X-Men universe, and now he's on one of their major teams. That is terrible, terrible, terrible fanfic.
Well, yeah, I mean, you Steve Orlando created Rufy the character. Okay, I'm pretty sure this is kind of creepy, but no, it is. It's now self-inserts and slash fic. I feel like anyone that's coming in for the superhero story is basically just tuning it out at this point. The people that are coming in to read that slice of life, there's just not that many of them.
And it's just not working in comic books. And you get these weird, stupid reveals for characters that have decades upon decades upon decades of existence within the universe because they're unwilling to create new characters because they have no name cachet, and it would take a lot of work to get them up and make them important within the universe. So they create new characters just for the Pride anthology and then change the sexuality of existing characters so they can have somebody that has some name recognition now.
Well, yeah, they have to. I mean, if they're not coattail like the new characters that are created, if they're not coattail riding by just stealing somebody else's identity, they're coattail riding by getting, I guess, forced, like mashed together with an existing character so that people will like accept them. No, you can't. You want to change sexuality of a character and then slap them with your self-insert character. It's literally as insulting as whenever Chuck Austin basically shoved Lorna out of the way so that he could stick his weird self-insert nurse character as Havoc's love interest all of a sudden. It honestly probably cost him most of his mainstream comics career.
Yeah, it kind of cost him his reputation, but that's not on the line anymore because there's a built-in, basically, excuse for failing with these characters nowadays, whether Marvel, DC, if you're on the X-Men line, it's because that the fans are homophobic. It's not that your story wasn't good or that you've taken a character and completely torn them apart, basically ripped the fabric apart of the character that's existed for decades. It's because the fans are wrong and they're clearly homophobic, Doc. And that's the only reason that these things could fail. So you get the same writers, whether it be Leah Williams, Vita Ayala, Steve Orlando, obviously we have Tini Howard here, and they get a fail over and over and over and over and over again. The only ones that have been shown the door really are Cena Grace and I guess Gabby Rivera, and obviously Cena Grace ended up burning down a lot of bridges to Marvel Comics. And it seems like that's the reason that happened. But there's no consequences for abject failure within comic books, especially if you're working with one of these LGBTQ characters or like a storyline that you're trying to put into the X-Men. There's no idea that quality is important within your comic book story. There's no idea that a superhero comic should have superheroics in them. And you can just fail over and over and over again and just continue to get chances because you can just say that the fans are wrong and they're bad and they're evil.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, there's a number of these creators especially in the X office that have figured out essentially the cheat mode. They've got the infinite live code for the X office video game. Self-insert, call myself queer, add queerness to existing characters, blame the fans when it fails. And it's the infinite life cheat code for this office. at some point, somebody's got to realize it, but, you know, Jordan White is obviously too fucking stupid to even recognize that everyone typed in the same cheat code. They're getting the exact same results, and he's sitting there going, I still can't fire them.
Well, you had XFactor essentially go out in spectacular fashion. You know, Leah Williams is a terrible writer. That essentially was a cast of all queer characters. They didn't fail because they were queer characters. They failed because Leah Williams is a terrible writer. We have Knights of X failing, canceled on issue number 5. Previous to that, you had Excalibur, canceled early because of low sales. And they're going to continuously give, apparently, Tini Howard carte blanche to create stuff with this Betsy Braddock character. And after seeing this page, you know what the next miniseries is. It's not going to be a heroic journey. It's going to be Betsy Braddock and Rachel Summers falling in love, and it's going to be about their relationship. It's the new Hulkling and Wicked, I guess.
First of all, it's not going to be a miniseries because it already graduated from ongoing series to miniseries. So the next thing is going to be a double-sized one-shot. That's where they graduate to whenever they successfully conquer ongoing to the point of cancellation, and then successfully conquer ongoing retconned into miniseries. So now they get to graduate to double-sized or triple-sized one-shot. Now, the only thing that I can say that may be interesting that could possibly come out of this is the claim that the butterfly thing that was surrounding them the entire time, that is somehow connected to Mr. M, and that because the butterfly thing has been Betsy's thing forever. Maybe they'll explore that and go somewhere, and you can find out that Mr. M has been controlling this whole fucking thing, and we're controlling Betsy for decades or something. But that would require a little bit of...
That is a pathway to disappointment, my friend, if you're going to be hoping on that.
Yeah, I know. That would be having expectations for this writer that are wildly outside of reason. Because that would be an actual interesting story. Instead, you're right. We're just going to get a double, triple-sized one-shot of Rachel loves Betsy.
So how long can they continue to this? Obviously, we saw what happened in America Chavez. That was terrible. We saw what happened to Iceman. That was terrible. But now we're getting more and more of this, and it's really terrible. But it's starting to feel like the norm. So more people maybe are accepting it. I hope not. I hope people still want good comic books. When are Marvel Comics going to course correct? Or do they even need to? Because there's enough good comic books out there that are selling that they can afford to just have all these loss leaders with these terrible stories so they can get headlines saying that we're championing LGBTQ causes by writing really bad, very caricature kind of characters and stuffing them into our universe.
Honestly, it can go as long as anyone is buying a single issue. They will justify it down to the point where they're selling 10 copies of this of one of these fucking books. They've run off all the actual like superhero comic fans. They've run them off. We're done. We've walked. Most of us have walked away. I'm down to very few comic books that I buy anymore.
I think a lot of my viewers today, they buy some comic books, but for the most part, they come in here to have a peek of what's actually going on and then thank their lucky stars that they're not the ones that had to read the damn thing that I had to.
Exactly. And I think that they'll hold on to this hope that publishing this and convincing themselves that this new magical audience that they've been trying for at least the past 10 years is right around the corner until somebody at Disney wakes up and goes, what the fuck are you people spending this money on?
The Betsy Braddock Rachel Summers story is just the tip of the iceberg. Marvel Comics and their writers are getting more and more daring and going more and more extreme with their portrayal of LGBTQ characters and relationships and whatnot. The most egregious, in my opinion, is this new character, Iceman. They're doing a miniseries on Marvel Unlimited. They aged the character, Bobby Drake, essentially down to 8-10 years old or something like that. Absolutely disgusting. Definitely check this out.